In this episode, we consider some recent comments from Denzel Washington on how in modern American politics, we're all slaves to information and being manipulated by both sides. Later on, we'll also weigh in on the recent exodus that we've seen from Twitter and Twitter/X over to other social media platforms for commenting and so forth. And we'll finish up by reacting to some recent studies on how being bullied may change the brain. Hello, welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys, and joining me today is a man who, when it comes to his podcast, sometimes wonders aloud, are you not entertained? Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, are you ready to step into the arena and put on a show today?
Yes, sir. Ready to be a gladiator. Let's go.
All right. Now, before we get started, if you enjoy the show, I ask that you hit subscribe and like the show on your podcast platform or on YouTube. Doing so really helps the show out. Now, recording on November 19th, 2024, and in doing an interview promoting his new movie, Gladiator 2, Denzel Washington shared some interesting perspective or thoughts, observations on the state of American politics, the Democratic, elections and all this other stuff, post-2024 election. And in relevant part, he noted that, that basically, or he said, quote, that we're all slaves to information, suggesting that, what we're seeing, may not be the whole picture and in fact isn't the whole picture. And we're reacting to that. And then also that we're being manipulated by both sides. And so now some of this may have been tongue in cheek, because he also was saying, hey, so because of all this, just go to the movies, which, obviously he's promoting a movie right now. But these points, they're interesting, to take a look at. Right? It's interesting questions in terms of, generally speaking, like we've done books, the Righteous Mind and things like that. People think they're in control of their thoughts, and how they're, how they're processing information. But there's been a lot of information out there saying that actually, with righteous information, you got the elephant in the rider, and then Righteous Mind, and so there are a lot of things out there that suggest that we are much more dependent on what we see and what's put in front of us, maybe more importantly, than we think as far as how we're reacting, how we're perceiving things. And then also whatever unconscious things are going on in our mind, we're much more a slave to that as well, and how we react to those things that are put in front of us. So jumping right in, Tunde, is Denzel right that we're all slaves to information and we're being manipulated by both sides in our democratic system?
I'll say he's probably right about several things that you just mentioned. One is that, we're being influenced and manipulated by information. And we should all probably just go to the movies a little more too. That's what I'm saying. I think anyone that has spent any time watching a few of our discussions definitely would understand and appreciate that you and I would probably agree with his overall stance about, us as humans, we can't be manipulated, persuaded, influenced, whatever words that one wants to use by certain types of information. And we just did the recent show on the book Nexus, which really we broke down the difference between information and truth. So I think there's something to be said there. Where I'll say that, again, I don't want to sit here and knock Denzel Washington for these comments because, like you said, I mean, he just being interviewed, someone sticking a microphone in his face, is probably just talking off the cuff a bit. But again,
and trying to get attention, literally trying to get attention because, hey, we want you to go see the movie, so to speak. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but I just feel like I don't think I want to assume he's not intending this, but this kind of trap of this both sides ism, and that both sides are manipulating you with information, which is true. But I just think that there's a traditional way of political communication, which I know that politicians have lied, and that's something that most people feel is common among politicians. And they may lie about, what their policy goals are, or about going to war about some country, or something like that.
So mass destruction.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. Like, we've all experienced this kind of stuff, and that's serious. I mean, lying us into a war is serious, versus just saying, I ate something for breakfast that I didn't eat. There's different things, a spectrum of lying. But I would separate the kind of traditional normal political behavior that we've all been accustomed to seeing with maybe the level of disinformation that we've begun to see in recent years from certain pockets of the American political sphere. And that's what I mean about outright deceptive tactics, whether it be, editing what people have said in interviews to make it look like they said something they didn't say. Certain ways that certain networks use chyrons to describe what someone is actually talking about when they don't actually let their audience see the person speak. Or like we've seen before, certain images, because images are so powerful of, let's say people crossing the border, quote unquote. That looks scary.
There was the famous one that you cite from time to time, where it's like, wasn't it something in the Middle East, like people were going over
Morocco,
or in Morocco,
they were like, this is on the southern border. I guess all brown people breaking down a fence look the same, apparently. So, but that's my point is saying. But that's my point is saying that. And that's why I'm not going to sit here and knock Denzel for just talking off the cuff. But I do think it's worth. That's why we're having a discussion, just kind of pointing out that yes. Is information used to manipulate? Yes, for all of us, including the best place is Madison Avenue, right? The American marketing and getting us to eat certain foods and all this kind of stuff is great.
We want to buy things that we don't need.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's my thought, man. So I'll pass it back to you. But
no. I think it's interesting. I think it's really a reality check. Again, and he's doing this as part of promoting a movie, so it's supposed to be kind of to get you to talk about it. And so hey, we're here talking about it. But I think that manipulation has such a negative connotation, whereas influence is more has less of a negative connotation. But yes, politics from on all sides, as you pointed out, are trying to influence us, and part of that is to manipulate or whatever. And the reason is that they're trying to get you to care about something, to care enough to either give money or to show up at a polling location and pull a lever, and so forth. And so what we've seen, with if they get up there with a bunch of spreadsheets. And start going through line by line. Hey, this is what we got to do, with our budget, and this is what we got to do with this and that. A lot of times, people won't care, won't show up, anything like that. It's just like people are bored. So, trying to get you to participate and care, and sometimes be fired up about stuff involves trying to influence you by tapping into your emotion. Because again, tapping into your intellect for a lot of people won't necessarily get them to fired up about stuff. So, I think part of the nature of large-scale democratic politics is trying to figure out ways to get masses of people to care about things that, sometimes may be kind of remote from them, and so that's why you see a level of manipulation. Now, I do agree with you that I think that the scale of manipulation and deceit can vary across the political spectrum. Also, what the manipulation of the influencing might be being done in service of. Are you manipulating people to try to get away with a crime? Or are you manipulating people to try to get them to care about the climate, going crazy and say, hey, we got to make some changes here so that we can maintain a habitable earth, And I think that matters too. What you're trying to do, like parents, manipulate / influence their kids all the time. Are you influencing your kids to take drugs? Are you influence your kids to try to do good in school and to not take drugs? So what you're doing it in service of matters. And then I agree with you also, the scale of it. Like, are you, how close to the truth? Are you presenting the truth in a way that will tug on emotional strings and which would be manipulation? You're presenting truth in a way. And again, we just did Nexus talking about truth and information and how they're not the same thing. But either way, are you presenting information say it a different way? Are you presenting information that is truthful and doing so in a way that is quote unquote manipulative because you're trying to pull on people's emotional strings or whatever? Or are you presenting information that is false or that is misleading to try to then influence people to go one way or the other? And so all of that matters. The human interaction inherently involves manipulation and influencing. And so that's not the notable piece. The notable piece is what's either the scale of, whether you're, how truthful are you being in that, one, and then two, what is it being done in service of?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we did this show some time ago about the research biologist and neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky, who was the one that had a book about his research has brought him to the conclusion that human beings don't have free will. And
Yeah.
so I still have a problem with that because probably I want to believe that I have free will.
Yeah.
But it's like the more and more we start thinking about these things, the more I can appreciate where he's coming from. Because again, I'm not sure I'm totally bought into it, but as we have this discussion, it reminds me of this idea that, yeah, if we're all susceptible to being kind of moved and persuaded or influenced, I agree. The word manipulate does have a negative connotation, but into certain different kind of acceptances of truth, let's put it that way, then maybe we don't have the type of free will that we believe we had. And I think you and I have, again, this is now maybe touching on conversation we've had just in the last year or two on our show. I mean, the amount of just kind of time we've given to topics like social media and how, the imperceptible changes. And I think most of us,
which was the quote, the social dilemma. That would just,
exactly.
I think that's a very important thing. The Social Dilemma is a movie we did a while back. And all of these are in our archives, by the way, but not all of them are video. But Social Dilemma, they're video, there'll be audio, but even whether it's in podcast platform or on YouTube, it'll be an audio format for some of these. But the money quote from that Social Dilemma movie was that social media is able to create imperceptible changes in behavior in its users. So you can change you without you perceiving and knowing that you've been and are being changed. So, but go ahead.
And I think, and that's because I think, look, you and I plus our audience now watching or listening to us, I think we can all relate to having seen people in our own personal networks in our lives that are in a much different emotional and mental headspace now than they were just 10 or 15 years ago. And that's why I think, like, when you look at, the way that our culture has gone, it's not all about some of these political discussions that we've heard, the working class versus this. I think a lot of it has to do with some of these things and some imbalances in the system. But those imbalances were there 10 years ago. So it seems to me that people have been persuaded, manipulated, influenced, however you want to say it, to accept certain things that have now become cultural norms that weren't cultural norms such a short time ago, that I don't know if we've seen this kind of rapid change without it being forced, like meaning, an authoritarian or some kind of war happening and you're just forcing this change on a society. This has become maybe the first time in human history that, and I'm hesitant to be that emphatic about it, but I can't think of another time when kind of just the society through kind of just business and technology made such a cultural shift amongst a large group of people, a large nation, and also the world. And I think that's why we're seeing things like the rise of authoritarianism around the world, not just in one country. Maybe that's why we saw this election in 2024 globally being the worst for incumbent government since 1905 or whatever that stat is. And I think it might be because we have all been influenced by social media, the internet, YouTube, things like that, to just either accept a different type of discourse or to accept that our fellow man is not is somewhat more of an enemy or a threat than we otherwise thought just a decade ago. So that's what's got me thinking, like, maybe our free will isn't as free as we think because we're so easily manipulated by just these kind of, outside forces.
You could sum that up by saying that we're all slaves to information.
Yeah. So we should just go watch. No, what to think about his remedy? We should go watch more movies.
Go watch Gladiator 2, apparently. But
go get more information.
But I think part of it, though, is, and I think that, what he's saying here is designed to create attention and all that stuff. So, but I think it's very helpful. Understanding this can be helpful to you. Just like, why do people write books like The Righteous Mind or Nexus and things like that? Why do we read those and get around and sit around and talk about them and stuff? And of course, why do we publish those conversations we have about it? But it's at least being aware of this, being aware, social dilemma, and you're like, hey, that the social media is changing you. If you're on it, by the way it presents information, what it presents to you, and so forth, it is changing you. And being aware of it can help you manage, whether it's help you. It may or may not help you. This is to your point on whether we have free will. It may or may not help you avoid being changed or being a slave to the information. But at minimum, you can at least sometimes be able to take a step back and realize that when you're plugging in like that, you're plugging into something that is affecting you in ways that may or may not be something that's beneficial for your best life. So if you may need to, you can take control at least some point and say, look, I'm going to pull back sometimes because I know if I plug into this, it's going to have me feeling a certain way or behaving a certain way. And I got real stuff to do with my life. I got to, I got to go earn a living, or I got to do this and that. So, because it's not something that it's not something you have to be a part of all the time, and so like Denzel said, you can just go watch a movie, and not sit there and be, doom. It's something called doom scrolling, that people do voluntarily, So, I think it's
now just thinking, like, imagine if there was doom driving. Like you just drive yourself into a wall.
I would do that.
We'd all be saying, like, what's wrong with this guy? He's driving his car into a wall and hurting himself.
No, for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, maintaining perspective, it can be helpful for your own kind of ability to cope, because as you said, the world is changing and it's changing very fast. And you've talked to me offline a lot of times, like, man, like we'll see something go on or somebody do something and people kind of shrug their shoulders. You're like, man, I can't imagine in the 1980s or, something like that. If this would have happened, then people would have flipped out, or whatever. Yeah. And like, so, and you've said that to me so many times about different behaviors that it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's just, people are, whether you be desensitized to it or see some greater evil because of the information they're getting, that, oh, well, it doesn't matter if this person is, a liar, a cheater, steal, all this other stuff. We got this other greater evil that we have to beat back. And, all of that is based on the information, that you're getting and so forth. So I think that there's wisdom in this. And yeah, I mean, maybe the answer is to just go see a movie because, again, like it being able to opt out, we're not unless Elon Musk gets his way and we're all plugged up to a Neuralink at some point, we're not required to be plugged in at all times. We still can't step away. And, maybe that's what's needed sometimes. Just, again, maintain your sanity and be able to continue to focus on what's important in the day-to-day part of your life.
Yeah.
So,
man,
but yeah,
that's it.
yeah, I was gonna say. So yeah, we can wrap this part up. Wrap this part up with the discussion. We appreciate everybody for joining it. Join us for parts 2 and 3 of our today's discussion, and we'll talk to you then.